Welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. My name is Audrey Monkey, and I am your host. I research, write, and speak about all things related to summer camp, parenting, and happiness. Here on the podcast, I talk to people who know about those things as well. In episode 8, I'm talking with Scott and Sally Whipple. They are the directors of several Bay Area summer camps here in California. They share with me 5 intentional decisions they've made that have shaped their parenting style. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hey, Scott and Sally, it's Audrey.
Hey, Audrey.
Hey, Audrey. How's it going?
Good. I'm so excited to have you guys on the podcast today. Why don't we start? I'd just like you guys to introduce yourselves, and you can talk about your camps and also your own family.
Okay, that sounds great. So we are Scott and Sally Whipple. We own and operate 3 children's summer camps in Northern California. The main camp that we run is called Mountain Camp, and it's up by Lake Tahoe, and it's a traditional sleepaway camp. We also operate a day and resident camp down in Woodside, California, which is near Stanford. And we have a farm camp, which is located on the Sonoma coast and focuses half its activities on farm and ranch-related activities and half of them on camp activities. We've been in the camping business for 25 years. Sally and I met at camp 24 years ago.
Another camp romance. Great. Okay.
Another camp romance.
They work.
And yeah, we've been married for 13 years, 14
Almost
years.
14.
There you go. So anyways, and we have 2 boys, and Sally will take it from here.
So yeah, we live in the East Bay of California in a sort of small town called Moraga. And we have 2 boys who are very active. They are a good fit into our camping lifestyle. And our older son, he is in 6th grade and is almost 12. And our younger son is in 4th grade, and he just turned 10.
Well, that is pretty fun. You guys sound like you have a pretty awesome life there. And you guys primarily spend your summer at mountain camp, right, with your boys?
Yeah, we do. We typically spend about 10 weeks up there. So leave the day after school ends, and we come back normally about a day or 2 days before school starts.
Well, that sounds familiar. All right. So we talked before we started recording the podcast about some of the things that you guys feel like you've learned from all of the training and work you've done through camp. Some of the things that you learned that you've applied in your own family as parents. And so you specifically kind of wanted to talk about sort of how you developed your style of parenting from what you learned at camp. So why don't you guys just tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, well, I'll start. So I think Sally and I are both on the same page that, we feel like for our kids, experience is the best teacher. And, there's a lot of different aspects that go into that, but one of them that, we embrace is the importance of failure. Mm-hmm. And, in a environment or society where, it seems like achievement is so important and success is so important, and those attributes are always honored, I think that camp kind of taught us that actually allowing kids, the space and freedom to fail ends up, really growing their confidence and growing their curiosity and growing their strength to grow into, healthy, well-adjusted adults.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had a few, there are a few times that we can think of where we could have stepped in and supported our kids and not had them fail. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times that feels a lot more comfortable as a parent than to, stepping back and taking that deep breath and saying, they're going to be fine. This is an important thing. And I think it's looking at that long-term parenting that, that we're parenting to create these adults and these lifelong learners, not just in that moment. And it's scary. I remember letting our older son go to school knowing that he forgot his homework and wanting to rush it up there and wanting to drop it off.
Right.
And recognizing he would be very sensitive to it and taking that deep breath and saying, nope, we're not doing it. We're gonna see where this goes. And having his teacher addressing it in a very appropriate manner,
Right.
It's important to bring it in. He got dinged a little bit. We had to sign a paper, but for the rest of the year and into this year, he double checks every day to make sure he had that in there. So that failure, that experience of failing has created something that's within him that we're not constantly saying, did you pack your homework? Did you get this? Did you get that? Did you get that? That he learned that on his own.
That's awesome. I'm still working on that with my kids. So it's good. The younger you can get them to do that, the better. It was funny because I once posted on Facebook, I had an experience where my son texted me that he asked, is this thing on my desk? And I texted him back, yep, with a sad face. And, you think about, like, with technology, I could have scanned it and, like, emailed it to him or whatever, and I didn't. And he knew I wasn't going to do that. And I posted about it, like, and my daughter commented, you're so mean. Because that's the problem is, like, sometimes these things, like letting our kids fail, it feels kind of mean. Like, don't want them to go through this pain, but boy, your son totally learned through that so much. And now you've saved him from so much pain later on.
Right, and those, recognizing that these things are much easier to learn in elementary school as opposed to high school or college. But they are hard, even as somebody who knows, understanding that, it's still hard to do.
Yep.
Right, and you have to fight that urge.
Yeah. And it's very easy to talk about it with, like, oh, yes, for sure, I would never take my kid's homework to school. But then when you're in the moment staring at it, going, oh, no, he's going to be so sad and it's going to be awful,
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
That's
Agreed.
an amazing lesson. That's a great parenting tip there. What else have you guys thought of as kind of some of your key things that you think about in your parenting?
Well, the one that kind of, that first one tails into is the value of authentic kid-generated work. And, as, the city we live in, Moraga, is, a fairly kind of upscale, successful area. And, when you go into the classroom to visit, you see, even in, the early grades, the projects that go home with the kids and come back, you can tell the parents did a bulk of the work on it. And it's really hard to send your kid up to school with his diorama that looks like, this weird, but he's, but understanding and, and rewarding and appreciating when work comes home that they do it on their own.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways it's good for the teachers to know, hey, that, if nobody tells them the kids can't do the work on their own, then homework isn't for the kids, it's for the parent. And, we've had some great experiences, like at the science fair, where a group of kids, worked together at our house on a science project, and it was all handwritten, and it was dirt all over it, and it was messy, but they were third graders.
Right.
And you go up and you realize, wow, this is the only kid-generated science project, solely kid-done in the whole science fair.
Right.
And you want to go up to the judges and say, hey, reward this.
Right.
But it doesn't always work that way.
Right. But the lesson the kid's learning is you have confidence in them doing it themselves, which is a far greater lesson than winning the science fair.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. And then also just learning how to do projects, right? Like or work together or to collaborate or to create something on their own that I think, again, it's hard to sometimes take a step back and say, okay, no, this is your project. Or you see them put something on the bulletin board and you're like, ooh, okay, like, is that really what we're sending in? But the answer is yes, because this is their work, and it's not ours. And then praising and valuing and thankfully, the woman who runs our science fair does stop by and say, wow, this is your project, project, and this is something you produced, and this is, It's amazing how often teachers will say, hey, thanks for allowing the kids to do the work and not creating it for them.
I was going to say, I feel a lot of pride when my kids took things to school that looked like they did it. I wanted to make sure that people knew that my kid did the assignment, not me.
There's also, I agree, but there's a balance when I know our older son went in with his diorama and he's looking at these other projects and he's like, well, mine doesn't look anything like that. And theirs are really awesome. And did you see the this and the that? And it's not too, and I have to remind him, not everybody, a lot of parents help. And that's okay and not looking down on that. But, you as a fourth grader can't compete with, an artistic adult.
Right.
And nor should you, right? But just know that this isn't, that we value what you do, and that's what's important to us.
Yeah.
Well, I was laughing because we live in a community where there's a lot of Pixar employees.
Right.
And so we can't even compete against them.
Don't even try, because these parents are, that's pretty
Don't
funny.
even try.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
But that kind of dovetails into the next thing that we thought was important, which is, so much of our parenting is freedom of choice. So whether it's what they want, how they want to design or do their science project, or what kind of sports they want to play, or what kind of musical instrument or music program they want to be a part of, we're very big on, you have to do something. You have to participate, in life. But, what that looks like is really up to you. And, if you want to, try a new thing, or if you want to quit a sport, because it's not fun or it's not rewarding to you, or if so much of childhood is trying new things and having a format for doing that. And I think kids really get a sense of power when they don't feel trapped. That they don't have to either follow in our footsteps or do what everybody else is doing, or in a lot of times, I've heard a lot of parents say, no, you made a commitment to this club or this sport, you can't quit. And this is probably, not what everybody wants to hear, but I don't believe that. I mean, I believe you get to kind of design your own life, and when you signed up for something, you did it with the intention that, hey, it's going to be fun, or it's going to be rewarding, or it's going to meet these needs of mine, and if it's not doing that, that's fine. It doesn't mean you don't make an effort toward it and you quit, the first time something goes wrong. But if you've given it enough, a healthy effort and you want to try something else, that's fine with us. And I think I had that freedom as a kid, and I like, watching my kids have that freedom and what they do with it.
So
and it's also the freedom. There are boundaries on that, right?
Yeah,
it's not just like, woohoo, do whatever, but it is kind of helping them sort of stay within boundaries. And within those, what sport do you want to play? Oh, I want to play soccer. Okay, well, what feels good? Like, did you want to play club soccer? And they're like, no, why would we do that? We want to do this because our kids sort of prefer, now everybody's different, but our kids prefer unstructured time.
Right. Well, just a follow-up question on that. I just want to ask Scott or either of you to answer. So with your kids knowing that you guys philosophically will, allow them, if they get into something and it turns out to not be what was expected or not going well, that they're allowed to stop or quit. How often have they actually taken you up on that? Or is it more that they've just been given this sense that they kind of have control of their own destiny?
Right. So I guess a great example of this would be our younger son chose to play the trombone, which was believe me, it was totally his choice. And he wasn't loving it. And he was really upset about it and would wake up on Friday mornings when it was music and just be bummed, And I said to him, music is a lifelong love. If playing the trombone is not great for you, let's change it. And the rule typically at our school is you got to you commit through the year, and really they want you to play 2 years.
Right.
But it was not worth, risking his love of music over. And so he said, okay, I want out. And I said, great. And I contacted the music teacher, and she explained to her, and she was great. She was like, okay, that's fine. And I went back to him, and I said, all right, so you can switch to chorus on Friday. And he goes, well, maybe I'll stick with it a little bit longer, just throughout the year. And it's interesting, I think once he knew that he wasn't trapped, and he knew that we would back him up if his choice was different, he seemed to want to stick with it. So I would say I can't really think of any time that we've just bailed completely on something that we kind of committed a team or anything long term. But I think they like knowing that they're not trapped.
Right.
Yeah.
And that their choice, again, it's their choice to stay in it.
Right.
And if you stay in it, you can't, if I found an out for you because you really don't like it, and you choose to stay in it, well, you can't complain. You lost that, privilege of complaining about it, and, you're choosing to stay in it. But yeah, I can't think of any time that.
Yeah, and we're a pretty active family, and we're pretty involved in, whether all sorts of things around the community. I remember once there was one thing that we didn't, a sport that we didn't consult them on. We're both big believers in lacrosse as a sport, and so we really wanted them to play. And so without getting their approval, we signed them up for a beginner clinic here in town. And we went to the very first day. We didn't even know, how to put on the equipment. We'd never played 1 minute. This was supposed to be a beginner thing. And what it really turned out to be, it was an off-season workout program for really experienced players.
Oh, dear.
And and so after the first thing, it was, you could tell it was a really bad fit. They couldn't compete. They couldn't. They struggled even doing basic drills, and they didn't want to go back. And I was like, that's totally fine. And part of that was our mistake. So, while it is always an option, I really think, there's got to be some prevailing reason, for them to not follow through with it.
Right.
Well, yeah. Some of the things I think about when I say that are, and you've probably seen this, but if you ever see some youth coaches and how they talk to kids, me, it's unacceptable. I mean, you wouldn't go into an office workplace, or you wouldn't accept this type of behavior from a school teacher, if your school teacher is yelling at you or screaming at you. So that's one of those things. We haven't come across it yet. I've seen it on other teams, but if it was ever one of those situations, once again, if they wanted to drop, I'd be like, absolutely. Nobody deserves to be that way.
Well, that was great. I mean, I think that's good clarification, because I think some parents would say, what? We always say you can't quit, but I think the way you guys do it seems really good, because you're giving them the choice. And I like how Sally said, okay, choir is going to start up because you're still doing music. You don't have to do this. And then it kind of clarified for him. And then he did have that freedom to decide, well, what do I want to do? So I think that's great. That sounds really good how you guys carry that out. Okay. What else do you have to share with us? What other wisdom?
Well, I had one more thing on that, in this long-term parenting model. I know this may be getting too far out there, but I think, when you empower kids to make changes in their life when things aren't working, so often, you talk to people, or you hear about people who hate their job, or they hate their life situation, or they don't like this, but they've never developed the skills to know how to change that. And so when I look at what I'm trying to do long term with my kids is empower them that if something's not working for them, it's okay to change. And there's a way to do it, and sometimes you'll do it the right way, sometimes you'll do it the wrong way. But I would be really bummed out if they grew into adults who worked at something they didn't like, or spent their life pursuing things that they didn't really believe in. And, so there is a lot of thought that goes into why we do it. And that's one of the things I did want to point out, because, it's a skill to know how to transition in life and understand what works for you and what doesn't work for you.
And it's not necessarily going to be the same thing that's working for someone else, even if it seems like most people are doing it.
Right. Absolutely. For sure. And I think that, that idea of not working even though other people are doing it, and Scott just touched upon it, but one of the things that camp has really allowed us to do is sort of be kind of go into parenting intentionally. And that doesn't mean that we're always like super intentional and there's like no reactionary happening, because believe me, there is. But I think sort of with those long-term goals in mind, and also recognizing that sometimes that intentional parenting with those long-term goals in mind are sort of, sometimes you feel like a salmon swimming upstream, right? You're going against the current of what everybody else is doing. And I think camp has really allowed us to feel comfortable when we make those decisions that sort of are against the current of our community. And be able to say, like, we're okay with this. We're okay that, maybe, I'm trying to think of a good example, but...
Well, what I was going to say is, when you're at camp, and you know this, sometimes the quirkiest, funniest, out-of-the-box kid is the most popular, successful, accepted kid. And that's, one of the things about camp that's great is everybody, can be their own person. And once you see that and experience that, it's really hard to go back to, just kind of being one of the crowd.
Right.
And so I think our kids, see that all summer long, and it carries over to their life at home, where they're not so worried about fitting in or, doing what everybody else is doing, and, being independent thinkers, and then also accepting people for who they are, which is something that, especially as their son is in middle school now, you see, that environment doesn't always exist, but it's really fun to watch when it does.
Yeah, and I think one of our... Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, when you gave the salmon example, Sally, I was thinking about, there's this saying, only dead fish go with the flow.
Oh, I like that.
And I thought that's like, I've heard that when you refer to like people just kind of just joining what everyone else is doing just because that's what everyone else is doing. I love that saying, only dead fish go with the flow. So then I got this visual of you guys, the salmon swimming upstream in your community while the dead fish are going with the flow. Go ahead, Sally.
No, I think along those lines, just one of the things we value and have always done with our kids, and it fits with their personalities, so it's really, it was easier to do because their personalities naturally flow with it, is this value of unstructured playtime. And sometimes in our community, you've got 3 different sports going on 4 times a week, and all this other stuff, and our kids didn't gravitate towards that. So it was really easy for us to say, you know what, we are a one sport or one activity, I should say, a sort of seasoned family. And beyond that, our kids come home and their favorite days are their days where they have nothing to do. And that's sort of our favorite days, or at least as a mom, that's my favorite day. So they come home, there are no plans. Next thing you know, they're knocking on neighbors' doors, or they jump on their bikes and ride to school to look for people, or somebody came home with them and they've got a fort being built that they're building down at the creek, and they have, games that are happening down there, and really recognizing that those times and those moments are so valuable in so many ways that, and so enjoyable for our kids, that I don't ever feel like, oh, they should be doing, we really need to get ahead on this, or we really need to do that, that those moments in themselves are extremely valuable, and I think that's something that camp has taught us.
Yeah, oh yeah, and on that same, along those same lines is, one, it's okay to be bored You do get that a lot, especially, for the kids who are used to coming, are playing a lot of video games. If they come to our house, the first 15 minutes, we're bored, can we play video games? It's like, nope, you guys outside, you know the deal. I kind of lost my train of thought.
Well, I just think that creates all this new stuff. We had a situation where one of the boys' friends was over, and he's an old friend, so he kind of hangs with both our boys. And yes, they want to play video games. Nope, you're not allowed to do it. And I turn my back, and next thing you know, they've gone up into our garden, our little home garden, and they've gathered everything there and put it in a wagon. And now they're going door to door selling it.
Selling what?
Selling like a pumpkin, or it was like 5 cents a cherry tomato, or like some like whatever. But they were gone for an hour, and they were totally engaged, and they were totally excited, and they walked and knocked on neighbor's door, and I think they made like $3.
Right.
And they thought it was amazing. And just that kind of that, saying no, we really try to limit screen times in our house. And I'm sure a lot of people do, but it's hard to do, right? Because what else are they going to do? And they don't know what else they're going to do, but you sort of let them sit for a while and stew on it, and then all of a sudden these things come up. They're selling pumpkins at the neighbor's house, or one day they were giving concerts with their musical instruments. Like, I couldn't find our kids, and I'm like, where are they? And I hear music coming from our neighbor's house, and I walk in, and 4 of them are in there playing a concert for our neighbor. And I have to say, it was sort of musical, but I mean, it was just something they came up with on their own, and just kind of that, how valuable those moments are.
Well, and I was gonna say that, all these things, though, I guess what camp taught me is all these things are learned skills. It doesn't happen just overnight that they become creative or they come up with these different ideas. It really is like a consistent, focused effort over time to give them the time and space to do these types of things. Because, one, if they're in front of a screen, it doesn't happen. But two, if they're in structured activities where they're always going from one practice or one meeting or one thing to another, they don't have that time to be creative.
Right.
And so when I think about it, as they come up with these things, that wasn't something that just happened. I guess it does kind of happen organically, but we gave it the space. Like, we consciously gave it the space of going, you know what, and sometimes when they're home with nothing to do, they fight. Right. And, it's working through those things and saying, hey, that's okay too. Like,
right.
It's in a lot of ways, to me, unstructured free time can be a lot harder to parent.
Yes, it's a lot more work for you because you have to listen to the complaints and you have to kind of stay strong with your, this is, no, we're not doing that right now. I wonder, it'll be really interesting to see kind of long-term, since your kids are younger than mine, what I'm really interested is like 5 years from now, be interesting to see what your kids are into and what they're interested in. And if it differs from some of their peers, I think, just looking at my own kids, my older kids had a very different, not as much screen-focused childhood because of the era that they were in. It was before Facebook. It was before smartphones and all of that. And I've just noticed with my younger ones, just looking at their friends, I mean, they get in the car and all of them are on something. And so of course, we all get to benefit from the summer of our kids being unplugged and everything. But I'm really interested to see with your kids who are in 4th and 6th grades now. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out as they get older.
Oh my gosh, we are so interested too.
Yeah, you're doing your own experiment because honestly, there are other people that are doing it, but it's pretty rare right now because of what you said. It's hard. It's really hard. And it's also, you have other people's children to keep in mind. Like, I have to tell, like, when my kids who are 13 and 16, if they have a friend stay overnight, I'm telling them, okay, this is where we plug in our devices, in my office. So I'm telling other people's kids, you can't take your phone into my kid's bedroom. And and it's a little bit like one of those things where you're like, I'm not really the cool parent. This is but you still want people to come to your house. Yeah. So
Right. No, that is a hard balance because we aren't the cool parents because, you cannot come over to our house after school and play 3 hours of Star Wars Battlefront. Like, that's not acceptable. And when you come over, same thing. It's like, put your phones down. And that's one thing, with the boys, when they have their friends over, I'll say, we you can text your parents, let them know you're here, but you can't be sitting on your phone. That's not what we do at our house. And I feel bad because sometimes my kids catch some flack for it because your mom is mean. She doesn't let us do this. She only feeds us fruit. And I have to explain to them, sometimes being a parent, we are going to do things you don't like. And if you liked me all the time and your friends liked me all the time, then I would be doing something really wrong.
Oh my gosh, that's a quotable parenting thing right there. Okay, we have talked for almost 30 minutes, which I think is quite long. It's probably my longest podcast. So I think we're going to have to do it again sometime because you guys have so many great ideas. And I think, I think something that we've talked about before and something I often say in my blog posts is that if everyone could just be a camp counselor for a summer or two, it would really help them a lot with their parenting. And when you were talking about how, before you even became parents, you had all these years at camp and both of you worked at camp, and seems like, wow, you really learned a lot that you've been able to apply as parents.
Well, and one thing that I think is important to say is, camp teaches, or, working at camp teaches you how to be a friend, but also be an authority figure. And I think parents and teachers and other, professionals that work with kids really struggle with that, where, what Sally says, the kids love Sal, and other parents love when their kids come to our house. But there's a very fine line that's hard for people to understand. But it is okay to be a kid's friend, but also be an authority figure.
Yes.
And that's why I think when camp counselors go into teaching or any of these other things, why they excel is because they know how to do that. They know how to maintain those relationships, those personal relationships, without giving up being an authority.
Yes, absolutely. Well, this was so much fun and really fantastic. As I said, you guys have a lot to share, so we're going to have to do it again sometime. So thank you so much for coming on and talking to me today. I really appreciate all your time.
Oh, it was fun for us.
Audrey.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed talking with the Whipples, and I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of the podcast. For show notes, visit my website at sunshine-parenting.com and search for episode 8. I'm not sure where this quote came from, but it reminded me of the Whipples. Sometimes you have to remind yourself that you don't have to do what everyone else is doing.